In John chapter 8, we see Jesus is debating with some religious leaders after he forgives the sins of a woman caught in adultery. They confront Jesus, basically saying, "Who are you to forgive sins? Are you greater than our father Abraham?" And he responds, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day." Now, obviously, Abraham lived 2,000 years earlier, so they say, "You aren't even 50 years old. How can you say that you have seen Abraham?" And Jesus answered them, "Truly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." All right, so why is this significant? Back in Exodus 3, almost 1,500 years earlier, when Moses encounters God in the burning bush, God tells Moses he's going to use him to deliver Israel out of slavery in Egypt. When Moses asks who he should say sent him, God says, "Tell them I am has sent you." Now, the name I am in Hebrew expresses God's timelessness, his self-existence, and his unchanging nature. This phrase ties directly to the I am that Jesus uses here in John 8:58. To the Jews, the name I am was objectively holy, set apart solely for God. No prophet or leader or teacher would ever assume this divine name for themselves. That would have been the height of blasphemy. So when these opponents of Jesus question him about equating himself with the status and glory of Abraham, he goes 10 steps further by claiming the title I am. This was a clear statement by Jesus equating himself to Yahweh, the eternal I am of Exodus. And his opponents got the message. They picked up rocks to stone him for blasphemy. They clearly understood that Jesus was presenting himself as co-equal with God. In John 10:30, Jesus makes the claim, "I and the Father are one." But to see how this is a divine claim, we need the context of the whole passage. Chapter 10 opens up with Jesus giving an illustration of a shepherd and his sheep. And he says, "The shepherd calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. He goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice." Further down in verse 11, he says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep." Then in verse 17, he says, "I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father." So here when he says that he is the good shepherd who gives his life for his sheep, and he will lay it down and take it up again, he's predicting his own death and resurrection. But they still don't get it. They say, "If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." So Jesus is like, "Okay, let me make it perfectly clear for you." We see his response in verses 25 through 30. He says, "I have already told you, and you don't believe me. The proof is the work I do in my Father's name, but you don't believe me because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. No one can snatch them away from me, for my Father has given them to me. He is more powerful than anyone else. No one can snatch them from the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." So he's saying, you want to know if I'm the Messiah? I've already told you. I've already shown you by my works. The Father and I are so unified in who and what we are that together we ensure the security of our sheep. We are one. Finally, he made himself clear to them. So clear that again, they pick up rocks to stone him. And when he asks which of his good works they're stoning him for, they say, "We're stoning you not for any good work, but for blasphemy. You, a mere man, claim to be God." More than 80 times throughout the Gospels, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. The context of this title has profound theological implications related to Jesus' authority, his eventual suffering and resurrection and glorification. So where does this title come from, and how is it a claim of divinity? The title, Son of Man, comes from the book of Daniel, written about 600 years earlier, and in chapter 7, Daniel has a vision of one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, sent by the Ancient of Days. Verse 14 says, "To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed." Jews who were familiar with messianic expectations would have seen this title as referring to a heavenly messianic figure of glory and authority. And the combination of Jesus' authoritative teachings, his miracles, his forgiveness of sins would have made it clear that he was claiming that identity for himself. And the reactions of his critics show that they clearly took it the same way. We see that at his trial in Mark 14. After Jesus is arrested, he's brought before the high priest Caiaphas, who asks him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And he responds, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy." And they all condemned him to be deserving of death. So the Jewish authorities clearly grasped that this was a divine claim, to the point that this was all the evidence they needed to ultimately condemn him to the cross. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you want to see the full video where that segment came from, you can click the thumbnail up in this corner. And if you want to see more apologetics content where I take a close look at these tough questions and misconceptions that people have about God and the Bible, you can subscribe by clicking the button down here.